compiling evidence and noticing patterns. So today, what to look for while you're reading are two things. First, back up ideas about characters with evidence. So consider the following questions while you're working. What's your idea? What did the character say or do? Go back and reread that part that gave you that idea. And then this is the important part. Explain how that connects or supports your idea. In addition, look for a pattern. So questions to help you identify a pattern. Start with describe your character in the beginning. 2, then describe your character now. In what ways have they evolved or developed? 3, what words describe your character? Do you see a pattern? And 4, provide text evidence examples from the book of your character acting on this way. I'm going to show you a sample of myself doing this in a moment that really focuses on the pattern. Some things that I've noticed that are all familiar with the character in my book, and it's kind of a pattern that's evolved, and the idea I've drawn from taking these pieces of text evidence that are similar to one another and noticing the pattern. One thing I want to note is you do not need to use a character. You can actually talk about conflict here. So back up ideas about conflicts with evidence, about setting, about character relationships. You don't need to do characters if you do not want to. If you notice a pattern, maybe it's something that the character constantly says. There's repetition, it repeats, or a different thing a different character says is maybe not your protagonist or your main character. Use that instead. So I'm showing you an example with characters, but you do not need to do characters. If you're looking for those level 4, maybe you focus on symbolism or metaphors or similes, different things of that nature, or repetition to really hit that level 4 and look for those big themes or important traits in your book. So while you what to do while you're reading today's, you got this form assigned to you on Google Classroom. All right, so compiling evidence and noticing patterns, check in. Notice your learning target. I can develop and polish ideas by compiling evidence and noticing patterns to build bigger ideas. Okay, so directions, watch this instruction video, what you're doing now if you hear this. Complete the chart below using your independent reading book, and then turn in when finished. Right, okay? If you're wondering what to do on it, you can look at my example. I'm currently reading The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah, and by currently, I mean I literally just read chapter 1, and I've just started. But it's a historical fiction book that focuses on World War II. There's 2 sisters in there, and it's supposedly a really good book. I've heard good things from other people who've read it. But right away in this first chapter, here are some of the things, and I just focus on character traits, but these are some text evidence that really stood out to me with one of the main characters, Vianne, I think that's how you say it. But notice, Vianne says, as I approach the end of my years, I know that grief, like regret, settles into our DNA and remains forever a part of us. Okay, next one. Vianne says, at least I will be forgiven. Text evidence 3. Vianne says, it embarrasses and shames me, this failure. And then lastly, text evidence 4. Vianne says that her son, it says he, but her son loves a version of her that is incomplete. So to me, all these things kind of connect because they have kind of a negative connotation, so negative connections to them. It doesn't seem very positive. And so to answer this last question, based on the evidence you compiled from your independent reading book, what is an idea or inference you are supporting? Vianne is living with deep regret as if something happened in her past life she has not come to terms with. All right, so the idea of her son, so I'm going to go back and connect them, is incomplete, right? He doesn't really know the real her. So something that's happened in her past. It embarrasses and shames this failure, so there's a deep regret there. The point that she can't even bring it up to her son, now I'm connecting these two together. Vianne says, at least I'll be forgiven. She says this in light of, because she's, I believe she has cancer and she's dying. And she's talking about, like, well, when I die, at least I'll be forgiven. So what's she going to be forgiven for? Again, we don't know. So it keeps, connects this forgiven, her past shames and embarrasses her, the failure, right? So something happened. And then lastly, as I approach the end of my years, I know that grief, like regret, settles into our DNA and remains forever a part of us. So these all connect to this final idea that I think is really going to drive the story, and it makes me want to read on and figure out what is going on or what had happened in her past. So you'll be doing this today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, but you are completing this with your independent reading book.